The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked between two advertisements and a church bulletin. There was no return address, no postage, just a slim white envelope that smelled faintly of dried flowers and dust. Inside, Clara Whitmore found a single ticket, one-way passage aboard the westbound Zephyr, departing from Chicago Union Station at midnight. The destination line simply read, "Where the map ends." Below it, in small cursive script, were 5 words. At 24 years old, Clara had already buried both parents, watched her hometown fall into silence after the factory closed, sold nearly every possession to keep a roof over her head. So when the invitation came strange and unspoken, she didn't question it. Some doors are meant to be opened without knocking. It's only a single conductor at the far end of Platform 9, holding a brass lantern and checking his pocket watch as if it ticked to some rhythm only he could hear. Not all travelers go back. At 11:20 p.m., she walked the 7 blocks to Union Station through frostbitten streets, where even the gas lamps seemed to shiver. He was tall, with silver in his beard and eyes the color of old maps. "You've got your ticket?" She read the note 3 times before slipping it into her coat pocket. That evening, Clara packed a modest satchel, a change of clothes, family photograph, a pocket Bible, and a journal she hadn't written in for years. A woman wore a high-neck dress with lace gloves. A man near the back held a bowler hat in his lap and read a newspaper dated 1876. No one spoke. Outside, a light snow had begun to fall, though the sky was clear. Some didn't even blink. Chicago's Grand Terminal loomed like a cathedral of stone and steel, but inside it was strangely quiet. Its windows glowed a soft amber. Smoke curled from its stack, though no fire could be seen. There were no shouting porters, no chugging steam, no families waving goodbye. But as the minutes or perhaps hours passed, she began to notice something peculiar. The westbound Zephyr gleamed in the moonlight, an old-style train of polished wood, brass trim, and velvet curtains. Clara hesitated before approaching. "Evenin', miss," the conductor greeted. It was warm. She handed it over. Only the low hum of something ancient and steady, like a song long forgotten. He didn't check the name, only nodded and said, "On you go. 3rd car, left side." Inside, the train was quiet. Not empty, but quiet. Passengers sat in pairs or alone, dressed in clothing that seemed misplaced. Clara took her seat by the window. The cushion was soft. The wood trim smelled faintly of cedar and pipe smoke. At exactly 11:59 p.m., the train gave a soft lurch and began to move. Clara glanced at the brass clock above the aisle. The minute hand trembled and stopped. It remained fixed at 11:59. Even as the world outside the window blurred into motion, city lights retreating, fields rising to meet them, trees bending gently as if to bow. For a while, Clara sat in silence, watching the land slip past. The stars outside the window weren't where they should be. The moon had changed shape slim, golden and too close. And though the train sped forward, there was no rhythm in the wheels, no clatter on the tracks. Clara touched the glass. Somewhere ahead, the conductor rang a bell once, twice. Station was coming. But there were no names on the signs, only symbols and shadows. The train slowed just before dawn. Outside the window, the sky hung like a faded curtain, heavy with dust and streaks of violet gray. There was no sunrise, only a shift in color, like ink thinning in water. The world beyond the glass had changed, flatland now, endless and golden, with tall grass swaying, even though no wind could be felt. Clara sat up straighter in her seat. She hadn't remembered falling asleep, and yet time had passed. Or maybe it hadn't. The clock above still read 11:59. The train hissed as it rolled to a stop, brakes sighing like the last breath of an old man. Clara leaned toward the window. There was a station platform, but no town, no buildings. Just a single wooden structure half-collapsed, paint peeling from its sides. A broken sign hanging askew with faded letters barely legible in the pale light. Whispering hollow, the doors to the train slid open with a creak.
No one moved.
The conductor stepped into the aisle, tapping his lantern softly against his palm. "We've arrived," he said in a quiet, almost reluctant tone. Passengers for Whispering Hollow may disembark here. Still, no one stirred. The silence was thick, oppressive, like being underwater. She looked around. The other passengers remained seated, unmoving. One man's eyes were open, but unfocused. She rocked slowly, hands folded in her lap, murmuring something too low to understand. The woman with lace gloves sat perfectly still, lips pressed tight, as if holding her breath. The air was dry, warm, and carried a scent like old books and lavender rot. Clara stood slowly. A single rocking chair sat near the window, and in it a figure. She turned back to the conductor. "Is this my stop?" And it never welcomes them back. Inside, behind a cracked window, she saw the dim flicker of a lamp. She pushed open the door with 2 fingers. He blinked once. "Only you can say," unsure what compelled her. Clara stepped down onto the platform. The boards creaked beneath her boots. The train remained still behind her. Didn't puff or rattle or chuff. Simply ... waited. Clara approached the broken station house. It leaned to one side, slumping like a tired drunk. The room was small. Dust thick as wool lined every shelf and beam. An old woman, dressed in a tattered shawl, eyes white with cataracts. "Hello," Clara said. The woman stopped rocking. Her head turned just slightly, as if bones protested the motion. "No second chances," she rasped. Clara blinked. "I'm sorry." "No one gets off here twice," the woman repeated, louder this time. "This place remembers those who leave." The wood was bare now, as if no one had ever carved words into it at all. Clara felt a chill crawl up her spine. I only got on the train last night," she said. "I've never been here before." The woman smiled, showing no teeth. "Haven't you?" Behind Clara, a distant whistle blew long and low, like a question with no answer. She stepped back, heart thudding, and returned to the platform. The train doors were still open, but the windows were dark. The lanterns inside had gone out. The velvet curtains were drawn, and when she looked up at the conductor's perch, it was gone. Only the lantern remained, swinging slowly in the morning air, casting long shadows across the track. Clara turned to look at the sign, again Whispering Hollow, but the name had vanished. She felt something pull at her chest, not panic, not fear exactly, but a sensation like being remembered by a place she didn't recognize. And somewhere far off, behind the tall grass and empty sky, she thought she heard a voice calling her name. Soft, familiar, faint. The train resumed its journey. Sometime after, Clara stepped back aboard, though she never heard the whistle blow again. No lurch of motion, no rumble of wheels, just the subtle sense that the world was sliding past outside the windows once more, too fast and too slow all at once. This time, she was the only passenger in her car. Everyone else was gone, not moved, not relocated. Gone. The velvet seats were empty, but the cushions were still warm. A single lace glove lay folded over the back of his seat across the aisle. The air was dry, yet it smelled faintly of perfume rose water and something older, darker. Clara walked slowly toward the rear of the train. The walls were paneled in old oak, and the floor was layered with a threadbare rug that had once been crimson. Each car she passed felt a degree colder, dustier, as though time inside them had begun to sag and collapse. She whispered, "Hello?" Once or twice, but her voice sounded hollow, as if it didn't want to linger too long in this place. At the very end of the train was a locked iron door marked caboose in worn brass. She pressed her palm to it. It opened with a reluctant groan. Inside was a single room, dimly lit by a small hanging lamp swaying from the ceiling. And there, against the far wall, stood a full-length mirror. Its frame was ornate carved vines curling along the edge, birds and roses locked in eternal flight. The glass itself shimmered strangely, as if not entirely solid. The lamp's light bent within it, warping around the edges. Clara stepped closer. Her reflection didn't follow. She froze. In the mirror stood a woman who looked like her but older, paler, hair longer and tangled. Her dress was torn at the sleeves. Her eyes were too wide, too tired. The wood behind her was smooth, seamless, like the train itself had no interest in letting her go. as if she had been traveling for far too long. The other Clara lifted a hand and pressed it to the glass. Clara's own hand remained still at her side. Then the reflection smiled softly, sadly, and she spoke. "You don't remember, do you?" Clara backed away. "Who are you?" The woman in the mirror was gone, and only her own pale face stared back at her. The reflection tilted her head. "I'm what you left behind. Or maybe what comes after." "I don't understand, you do," the voice said gently. "But you've chosen to forget." Clara turned toward the door, but it had vanished. "Where is this train going?" she whispered. "To the place you promised you'd never return to." She felt cold now, not from the room, but from something deeper, like a truth she'd buried, waking up inside her chest. "I never bought a ticket," Clara said. "Never boarded this train." "No," said the reflection, and the glass shimmered. "You didn't." The mirror darkened for a moment. When her reflection returned, Clara was alone again fully. The door creaked open behind her. Clara turned, heart in her throat. Standing there was the conductor. His lantern glowed dimly, and in its flickering light, his face seemed older than before, lined with sorrow, heavy with years. "It's almost time," he said. "One stop left." Clara followed him back through the train in silence. Past empty cars and ghosted seats, past windows that now showed only fog. The world outside had disappeared. All that remained was the track ahead, and a name she could almost remember. There was no whistle this time, no warning bell, just the slowing pulse of the train, like a heartbeat winding down. Clara stood beside the conductor as they approached the final stop. Outside, the fog began to clear, unveiling a landscape that stretched far and wide, open plains beneath a sky thick with stars. They danced softly with the motion of the train. Clara glanced up at him. His eyes looked tired. Not cruel, not kind, just old. It's not an end. Just where the tracks no longer pretend to lead. As if he had watched too many people come and go, too many names forgotten, too many stories loop back on themselves. The land shimmered slightly, as if coated in memory. A breeze that whispered secrets in no known language. The conductor's lantern cast long shadows against the walls of the carriage. The other passengers were there too, but they didn't speak. They walked in different directions. One by one, they faded into the mist, into the grass, into the stars. "Is this the end of the line?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, it was a murmur. The train came to a full stop with a sigh, where maps forget their names, and time doesn't need to behave. Outside the window, there was no station. No sign, no lanterns. Only open land. Rolling hills. Wild grass catching silver moonlight. Clara stepped off the train. The earth beneath her feet was soft, cool, and dry, yet somehow familiar. "Which am I?" Clara stood still. "What is this place?" she asked aloud. The conductor stood behind her. "Some call it the frontier." "The real one," he paused. Then added, "Some people ride this far because they're ready to walk again. Others stay aboard until the train turns hollow." She turned to him. He smiled faintly. "That's why we stop, so you can decide." Clara looked out across the hills. Not even when its lanterns dimmed. Not even when the conductor called, once softly. "Thank you for riding with us, Miss Whitmore." There was no path, no buildings, no destination. Just possibility, stretching out under a sky that looked older than anything she had ever seen. She turned her face toward the breeze. It smelled like summer when she was 8, like her mother's handwriting, like something she'd forgotten she missed. And then she remembered the voice in the mirror. "You don't remember, do you?" "You do, but you've chosen to forget." She took one step forward, then another. With each step, her shoes grew lighter, her satchel softer on her shoulder. She did not look back at the train. She didn't answer. She just kept walking. And behind her, the train exhaled once more, its final breath fading into the stars. No one ever found Clara Whitmore's name on any list of settlers or passengers, but in certain places, under certain skies, where the land rolls wide and the wind whispers gently, people say they've seen a woman walking through the grass, calm, curious, unburdened, searching for something she might have left behind. Or perhaps finally heading home.